What if sea creatures have been caught speaking human words, not in fairy tales, but in real life, with scientific proof? These documented cases will make you question everything about ocean intelligence. Today, we're counting down the top 3 sea animals that shocked scientists by mimicking human speech. Each case has real evidence, military records, published studies, and audio recordings. Get ready to hear eerily human voices from the deep. Coming in at number 3 is a story that sounds like it's straight out of a Disney movie, but it's completely real. Meet Hoover, a harbor seal who didn't just learn to speak. He learned to speak with a thick New England accent. It all started in the 1970s when a Maine fisherman found a tiny seal pup on the beach. Instead of leaving him, the fisherman took Hoover home and raised him like a pet. For months, little Hoover lived with this family, listening to conversations around the dinner table, hearing the TV, and most importantly, bonding with his human caretaker. But here's where it gets incredible. When Hoover grew too big for home life and was moved to the New England Aquarium, something amazing happened. Visitors started reporting that they could swear they heard someone talking near the seal tank. Zoo workers thought people were imagining things until they heard it themselves. Hoover had learned to mimic human speech and he was good at it. He could clearly say, "How are ya?" in a gruff New England accent that sounded exactly like his original caretaker. He'd also bark out, "Get out of here," when he was annoyed, again with that unmistakable Boston area accent. Scientists who studied Hoover confirmed that he was actually forming these words using his vocal cords and throat muscles in ways that seals had never been documented doing before. He wasn't just making random sounds, he was deliberately mimicking the speech patterns, tone, and even the regional accent of the humans who raised him. What made this even more remarkable was that Hoover seemed to use these phrases in context. When visitors crowded around his tank, he'd often greet them with, "How are ya?" And when he wanted to be left alone, out came the, "Get out of here." At number 2, we have a case that made international headlines and changed what scientists thought was possible. Wikie, a killer whale at Marineland in France, didn't just learn to speak. She learned to speak without lips or a tongue. Think about that for a moment. Humans form words using our lips, tongue, and teeth. Whales have none of these things. They have a blowhole, nasal passages, and internal structures that are completely different from ours. Yet somehow, Wikie figured out how to make human sounds. The breakthrough came when researchers decided to test whether orcas could learn vocal mimicry the same way some birds do. They started simple, having Wikie copy other whale sounds. But then they tried something unprecedented. They asked her to copy human words. What happened next stunned everyone. Wikie learned to say, "Hello," so clearly that people listening to recordings often can't believe it's coming from a whale. She could say, "Bye-bye," count 1, 2, 3, and even managed to copy her trainer's name, Amy. But here's the really mind-blowing part. She was doing this entirely through her blowhole and nasal passages, using muscles and air control that whales typically use for echolocation and communication with other whales. Wikie somehow figured out how to modulate her sounds to match human speech patterns. The research was published in 2018 in a major scientific journal, complete with audio recordings and detailed analysis. The study proved that orcas have far more vocal flexibility than anyone had imagined, but it also raised bigger questions. If Wikie could learn human words this easily, what does that say about whale intelligence and communication in the wild? Scientists noted that Wikie seemed to understand that she was supposed to copy what she heard. She would listen intently, then attempt to match not just the sounds, but the rhythm and tone. Sometimes she'd need a few tries, but she'd keep adjusting until she got it right. And now, the number 1 most shocking case of sea creatures talking like humans. This story comes from a classified Cold War military program that sounds like science fiction, but it's documented scientific fact. Meet Nock, a beluga whale who was part of the US Navy's marine mammal program. These programs trained dolphins and whales for military missions. But Nock did something that wasn't part of his training. He started talking. The first reports came from Navy divers who thought they were going crazy. They would be underwater near Nock's tank when suddenly they'd hear what sounded like a human voice telling them to get out. The voice was so clear, so human-like, that divers would surface looking around for who had spoken to them. But there was no one there except Nock. What made this even more unsettling was the quality of Nock's voice. Unlike other animals that mimic human speech with obviously animal-like tones, Nock's voice had an eerily human quality. The pitch, the rhythm, even the emotional tone sounded like a person speaking underwater. The Navy initially kept this classified, but eventually marine biologists were brought in to study what was happening. The researchers found that Nock had somehow learned to mimic human speech by manipulating his nasal tract and controlling air pressure in ways that beluga whales don't normally use for communication. He was essentially re-engineering his own vocal system to produce human-like sounds. But here's what made Nock's case unique. He seemed to initiate conversation, while other animals typically mimic on command or in response to training. Nock would spontaneously speak to humans, particularly when divers were in the water with him. The timing and context suggested that Nock understood these sounds had meaning and were used for communication between humans. He appeared to be trying to join in human conversation using our own language. Before we wrap up, there's one more mystery that deserves mention. In 2010, underwater monitoring equipment detected something that still has scientists puzzled: clear singing voices coming from the deep ocean. The recordings captured what sounded like human voices singing or chanting in an unknown language. The sounds were too structured to be natural ocean noise, too musical to be random, and too clear to be equipment malfunction. Multiple theories emerged. Some scientists suggested it could be an unknown species of whale with unusually human-like vocalizations. The most intriguing possibility: that there are sea creatures out there with vocal abilities we haven't discovered yet, possibly communicating in ways that accidentally sound human to our ears. To this day, the source of these 2010 recordings remains unidentified, leaving us with the unsettling possibility that our oceans are full of voices we're only just beginning to hear. These cases prove ocean intelligence is far more complex than we imagined. Animals learning human speech without human anatomy suggests incredible cognitive abilities that challenge everything we knew about marine life. But here's the mind-bending question. If they can learn our language, what are they saying in their own? What conversations are we missing in the deep? We've explored less than 5% of our oceans. How many other talking sea creatures are out there? The answers are waiting in the depths, and they might be trying to tell us something right now.